Annuncio vobis gaudium magnum.
The stunning and historic news from the Vatican.
Habemus papam.
The first U.S.-born Pope. The cheers and celebrations as Robert Prevost, now known as Leo XIV, greets the world.
La pace sia con tutti voi.
We're with the Americans watching it unfold in St. Peter's Square.
My body starts vibrating. I didn't know whether to cry, to scream. It's so wonderful.
And we hear from family and friends of this son of Chicago, seen here in this 1969 class from St. Mary's School.
Some people play school, or some people play army. He played priest, and we had to go to Mass.
I gotta say, he looked really good on the balcony up there at the Vatican.
And why many view the new leader of the world's nearly 1.4 billion Catholics as a unifying figure.
Very down-to-earth, very plain-spoken. He's a very modest man.
This special edition of Nightline, The American Pope, will be right back. This special edition of Nightline, The American Pope, continues. Reporting from Vatican City, Terry Moran.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Terry Moran at the Vatican, and we begin tonight with the history made here. Amid all the pageantry, the papal conclave has elected the first American Pope, Chicago-born Robert Prevost. He is the 267th pontiff leading the world's 1.4 billion Catholics. And he selected the name Leo XIV. He's widely regarded as a potentially unifying figure. Some of the Italian media has described him as, quote, the least American of the Americans. ABC's Maggie Rulli was among the crowd in St. Peter's Square.
A moment in history. The first ever Pope from the United States.
La pace sia con tutti voi.
Pope Leo XIV, with tears in his eyes, stepping before the world's 1.4 billion Catholics as the newly appointed pontiff.
Fratelli, sorelle carissimi, questo è il primo saluto del Cristo risorto, il buon pastore che ha dato la vita per il gregge di Dio.
The energy surging through St. Peter's Square, and dotted in the crowd, some Americans. They are witnessing history.
Hearing it's an American Pope, what does that mean to you?
I mean, this is, I don't even know what to think. I can't process it yet. Obviously, it's groundbreaking historically, and I have high hopes for what he can do in the Vatican and globally.
My entire body was shaking when the Pope was announced. And then we hear my husband screaming in the background, he's the American from Chicago. We're like, what?
When they would bring up his name, and we'd be talking about candidates. And I say, oh, he's a very accomplished guy, but they'll never elect an American. So I was pretty wrong about that.
President Trump responding from the White House earlier today.
What greater honor could there be? And we were a little bit surprised, but very happy. It was just a great, absolutely great honor.
There's always been a tacit sense that America, being a superpower, would not also occupy the papacy. He is called by some the least American of the American cardinals because he's had so much international experience, even being the bishop of a diocese in Peru.
The Pope selected after just 2 days of the conclave and only 4 rounds of secret voting.
Well, we don't know anything about what actually happened indoors. We suspect that early on, Cardinal Prevost, now Pope Leo XIV, was seen as an excellent candidate by both sides.
Just after 6 p.m. local time today, white smoke billowed out of the Sistine Chapel. Then, the bells, signifying 2/3 of the 133 cardinals in the conclave had picked Pope Francis's replacement. Appearing on the balcony at the Vatican today, just as the sun began to set, greeting the thousands gathered in St. Peter's Square, and then his first blessings to the faithful.
We walk together, as St. Augustine said, towards Christ, that God, on the path that God prepared.
Honoring his predecessor.
thank you to Pope Francis.
Pope Leo began the day as Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost, born on the south side of Chicago, where he attended Catholic school and is a baseball fan. Mark Lancaster was the Pope's grade school friend at St. Mary of the Assumption.
What I always remember was he was brilliant, very, very smart. A lot of the kids like to try to sit behind him in class, especially during math class, for possible hints on how to solve problems. He was always very smart, eloquent, reverend, very reverend and devoted to the church. He had the humility and kindness about him.
Prevost seen here in this 1962 class photo.
He developed friendships all over the world, so I am honored to have known him in the early years.
James Priestley went to high school and college with the now Pope. He says back then, they called him Bob.
Bob is the one guy that if you were going to pick a person in your class who was going to become the Pope, Bob would be the person you would guess. He's very religious, a very devout Catholic who's devoted his life to Christ, and he's extremely bright.
His father was of French and Italian descent and his mother of Spanish descent. And he's said to be a Rosetta Stone when it comes to language, speaking English, Spanish, Italian, French, and Portuguese, and can also read Latin and German. At 69 years old, he's on the younger side for a newly appointed pontiff. Both Popes Francis and Benedict were in their late 70s. He studied at the Minor Seminary of the Augustinian Fathers, and then at Villanova University in Pennsylvania. In 1977, earning a degree in mathematics and studied philosophy. The bells ringing at the Pope's alma mater, Villanova University. He was ordained as a priest in 1982, seen in this church photo meeting Pope John Paul II.
Augustinians are a group of priests who subscribe to the particular sort of charism or mission. That charism is a combination of intellect, dedication to the truth, and care for people and a life of simplicity.
He spent many years as a missionary in Peru before being elected head of the Augustinians for 2 consecutive terms. In 2023, he was brought to Rome, where he was appointed a cardinal by Pope Francis. Pope Leo is the youngest of 3, his brother, John Prevost, speaking to my colleague Alex Perez.
I don't think it's really sunk in. It's kind of surreal. It's great pride.
When you found out, obviously you have pride, that's your brother.
Mm-hmm.
Did you expect this?
To tell you the truth, no, because I kept hearing there will never be an American Pope. But when I heard he was in a group of 3, then I thought, well, this could happen.
But to him, the pick wasn't entirely a surprise.
Some people play school or some people play army. He played priest, and we had to go to Mass.
With you guys, okay.
Yes. The ironing board was the altar. A woman down the street said he would be the first American Pope. In first grade, they said that.
First grade?
Uh-huh. He knew at that age he was going to be a priest.
When we were kids, we used to play cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians, shooting each other and whatnot. He used to play priest and distribute Holy Communion like with the Necco wafers. And that was his thing. And we're like, what's wrong with you? But yeah, he just seemed to always know his calling. And here we are today. And I got to say, he looked really good on the balcony up there at the Vatican.
What kind of person is he?
A regular, run-of-the-mill person. I think because he was trained in missionary work in South America for so many years, he will be looking out for the disenfranchised. He will be looking out for the poor. He will be looking out for those that don't have a voice.
John says his brother was inspired by Pope Francis.
I think they kind of believed in the same issues, so I don't know that there'll be much difference. He might prove me wrong, but I don't see there'll be much of a tradition breaking the tradition of Pope Francis.
As a cardinal, Pope Leo has been described as a centrist who holds some progressive views.
I hope so dearly that he is considered neither progressive nor conservative, but rather as robustly Catholic, and that the Church can put behind it these debates about where we stand on things that we've stood upon for 2,000 years and move forward with the work of making Jesus Christ more present in the world.
Our thanks to Maggie for that. Let's go back to ABC's Alex Perez in Chicago, who we just saw with the Pope's brother, John Prevost. What an interview there, Alex. What's the mood and reaction from the new Pope's home city there? Mine too, Chicago.
Hey, Terry, there's a renewed sense of energy and inspiration in the air here in Chicago, especially among the nearly 2 million Catholics who live in the area. Now, this is Holy Name Cathedral behind me here. It's the seat of the Archdiocese here in Chicago. It's where a lot of people came to pray after they learned of the new Pope. Now, if you talk to people who know Pope Leo, who knew him as just Father Rob, many of them will tell you the same thing, that they always felt he was destined for something bigger, destined for a position like this one. And also, there's an enormous sense of pride. Not only is he the next global leader of the Catholic Church, but he also happens to be a Chicagoan, and that puts a huge smile on a lot of faces here. Terry?
Thank you very much, Alex. Coming up, the challenges ahead for the new American Pope. Welcome back. A historic day, a stunning day here in Rome. For the first time in history, there is an American Pope. Something no one could have imagined. So let's talk about it with our two colleagues here, ABC News consultants, who are very well versed in all. Father James Martin, Father John Walk, an American Pope. I mean, what did you think when you heard his name?
I was stunned. I know him a little bit from the Synod. He's kind and modest and reserved, down to earth, very nice guy, hardworking. Father John and I were saying we've heard nothing bad about him in the Vatican. No one's complained about him, which is quite a feat. And former prior general of the Augustinians, which means all the Augustinians hold him in high regard. So a brilliant choice.
And Father Walk, a Chicagoan, went to Villanova.
I think it's going to be a great novelty for the world to hear Catholicism spoken with an American accent. And it's going to make a huge impact on the United States. When he arrives in the United States and starts talking as Pope with the tone of a boy from Chicago,
yeah,
it's going to be a mind-blowing event.
Well, and what possible impact can that have? I mean, will that bring people to the church, back to the church, do you think?
I think it'll bring the church closer to people, right, to their own experience, not seem something on the other side of the ocean, right? You know, we're accustomed to hearing, Pope speak in Italian, Spanish now, German, but now it's going to be English, right?
American English.
And American English.
And the flip side, there'd long been a thinking that there won't be an American Pope because that's too much United States of America for the world to deal with. And do you think there would be resentment a little bit around the world? The United States can be an overbearing power in the eyes of many people.
I think that was the concern among some people, that they already have power, military power and economic power. Do they need sort of religious power or ecclesial power? But I think once people get to know him, they describe him in Italy as the least American of the American cardinals because he spent so much time in Peru. But I think once people get to know him and see how kind he is and down to earth and hardworking and decisive, I think that will carry the day.
Now, I'm going to go back to the moment we heard, and just after we got off the air, you were quite emotional about this Pope. Why?
I think because of the fact that I know him, and I know that it's such a great choice. And the choice of name I found very moving, sort of signaling his desire to be with workers and labor. And then just relief that the Holy Spirit worked and the cardinals chose a wonderful Pope. So all those things combined to make it an emotional night. And of course, from the United States, too.
Now, for the challenges before the church, what does it say about what the cardinal electors were thinking the church needs and what he can bring to it, Pope Leo can bring to it?
Well, remember, as prior general of the Augustinians, he's in charge of a worldwide order. He was in charge of some of the most important decisions in the church, which is assigning bishops and choosing men to be bishops in different dioceses. He has the perfect background. He brings the missionary work in Peru. He brings the knowledge of the Vatican, but he brings this, managerial sense, which I think the Vatican could surely use.
Because it's a great big bureaucracy and needs somebody to ride herd on it sometimes.
Yeah, and there's a deficit, and that needs to be taken care of. As I said, I interacted with him during the Synod. I found him to be pretty forceful too. I mean, he's not afraid to speak his mind. He's pretty confident, which I think it's a great combination of skills, I think, and blessings for the church.
And one of the things that we were talking about before the election, Father Walker, is this sense: is there going to be continuity with Francis? Is there going to be change? Do you see the conclave making a statement about that and the choice of Pope Leo?
Yes, and continuity and change. I mean, obviously, the change is the American, right? But it's an American who spent many years in Latin America, and that's obvious continuity with Pope Francis.
Now, this may be superficial, forgive me, but he came out, we remember Pope Francis came out in the simple white cassock. And here we see once again some of the papal vestments, some of the more elaborate papal vestments. What does that tell you?
Honestly, I thought it was great because I thought, look, he's a down-to-earth guy. People know that. But I think there are people who prefer, more of a traditional style. And so maybe he's kind of giving a nod to them, right? Like, you're welcome too. So his address was very open and very welcoming and very Francis-like, right? Church for everybody. But his style was, maybe more like Benedict. So I think that's kind of a nice, a nice combination of those two traits.
And he didn't speak English.
No, I think that it was telling that he spoke in Italian.
La pace sia con tutti voi.
As the Bishop of Rome should speak in Italian to the people of Rome first. But he also spoke in Spanish.
Spanish.
And he left out English. And I don't think he wanted to impose the Americanism on the world, certainly not at the starting gate. And I thought that was very, very intelligent. He began with the words of Jesus Christ. He began quoting, "Peace be with you." Right? And it's the message of the resurrection, Jesus speaking to us after the surprise of the resurrection.
The President of the United States is a global figure himself. Donald Trump is shaking up the world in ways that, some Catholics have problems with, some Catholics support. That's going to be a fascinating relationship.
I think it will. I think, look, the Pope, basically, his job is to proclaim the gospel, right? And if the gospel, has political implications, so be it. But the Pope does not set out to be a political figure per se. He's a spiritual leader, first of all. And if that has implications, then we deal with that.
What do you think of that relationship when he visits America? He's bound to.
Yeah, I think as we saw that Trump he was happy, and he took it as a compliment to America. And I think Trump may appreciate the fact that the Pope is an American. I'm not sure that it's going to be a hostile, relationship at all.
Right.
We'll see.
Could be quite productive. All right, great day here. Father James Martin, Father John Walk, thank you very much for being with us, and we'll be right back. That does it for us tonight from here at the Vatican. Tomorrow night, we invite you to a special 2020 looking at the life of Pope Leo and, of course, fresh reaction on GMA in the morning. We leave you with some of the sights and sounds from around the world on this day. Good night, America.